The world is installing solar panels faster than ever. Wind farms are expanding. Electric vehicles are breaking sales records. Countries are announcing net zero targets almost every year. So shouldn't climate change be slowing down by now? Surprisingly, the answer is not really. In fact, according to one of the world's most respected climate reports, no country on Earth is doing enough to stop dangerous climate change. Not the richest, not the greenest, not even the country ranked number 1. Today we are decoding the Climate Change Performance Index 2026 to understand who's actually leading the fight against climate change. Why even the best countries are still falling short, where India stands, and what this report tells us about the future of our planet. What is the CCPI? The Climate Change Performance Index, or CCPI, is one of the world's most comprehensive assessments of climate action. Published every year since 2005, it evaluates 63 countries along with the European Union, representing more than 90% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Its purpose is not to measure how green a country looks, but how effectively it is reducing emissions and transitioning toward a low-carbon future. The report is jointly prepared by German Watch, the New Climate Institute, and the Climate Action Network, with climate policy assessments contributed by more than 450 climate and energy experts from around the world. Today, governments, researchers, financial institutions, and civil society organizations use the CCPI to compare national climate performance and identify both global leaders and laggards. How to understand the CCPI? Unlike many environmental rankings that rely on a single score, the CCPI evaluates countries across 4 major categories, each carrying a specific weight. The largest share, 40%, comes from greenhouse gas emissions, because ultimately the goal of climate action is to reduce emissions. The remaining 60% is equally divided among renewable energy, energy use, and climate policy, each contributing 20% to the final score. The methodology follows a logical sequence. Good climate policies encourage investments in renewable energy. More renewable energy improves energy efficiency and reduces dependence on fossil fuels. These changes eventually lead to lower greenhouse gas emissions. In other words, the CCPI doesn't reward promises. It rewards measurable progress. And perhaps the most striking feature of the index is this. The top 3 positions remain intentionally vacant, not because no country submitted data, but because the report concludes that no country is currently doing enough to keep global warming within the Paris Agreement targets. Even Denmark, the world's highest-ranked country, falls short of the very high overall performance required to occupy those positions. That single decision sends a powerful message. Climate leadership today doesn't mean we've solved the problem. It simply means some countries are doing less badly than others. The top performers. So, who came closest? The highest-ranked country in the CCPI 26 is Denmark, occupying the 4th position because the first 3 remain empty. It is followed by the United Kingdom, Morocco, Chile, Luxembourg, Lithuania, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, and Sweden, all of which are among the world's strongest climate performers. At first glance, these countries seem very different. Some are wealthy European economies, some are developing nations, some have abundant natural resources, others do not. So what do they have in common? The answer is consistency. Take Denmark. The report highlights Denmark's rapid deployment of heat pumps, strong climate policies, and decades of investment in renewable energy. It continues to lead despite not achieving a very high overall rating. The United Kingdom has transformed its electricity sector through ambitious legislation, including the landmark Climate Change Act, while also deciding to halt new fossil fuel extraction licenses. Morocco has become one of the world's fastest-growing renewable energy success stories, supported by large-scale solar projects that are changing the country's energy landscape. Chile has rapidly expanded renewable energy deployment, particularly solar power, taking advantage of its exceptional natural conditions while strengthening climate policies. Its continued improvement reflects how developing economies can also become climate leaders. One interesting pattern immediately stands out. Europe dominates the rankings. More than half of the top 20 countries come from Europe, reflecting decades of investment in clean energy, stricter environmental regulations, carbon pricing, and coordinated climate policies. Countries such as Luxembourg, Lithuania, Portugal, Sweden, France, Germany, and Spain all feature prominently, while the European Union as a whole ranks 20th with a medium rating. However, Europe isn't alone. Countries like Morocco, Chile, Pakistan, Nigeria, Brazil, and Vietnam show that developing economies can also perform strongly when policy direction and renewable investments align. The lesson is clear. Climate success isn't determined by wealth alone. It's determined by long-term political commitment. If you're enjoying these data-driven analyses of global rankings and want to understand more of it, don't forget to subscribe to the Fellow Learner. Every week, we decode reports that shape the future of countries, economies, and our planet. Now let's look at the opposite end of the table. If the top countries show us what's possible, the bottom-ranked countries reveal exactly what the world must avoid. According to the CCPI 2026, the 10 lowest-performing countries are Australia, Japan, Argentina, Chinese Taipei, Kazakhstan, Canada, the United Arab Emirates, South Korea, Russia, the United States, Iran, and finally Saudi Arabia at the very bottom. These countries receive either low or very low overall ratings because of persistent weaknesses across emissions, renewable energy, energy use, and climate policy. One pattern immediately stands out. Most of these countries are either major fossil fuel producers, highly industrialized economies with very high energy consumption, or both. Although some renewable projects have begun, fossil fuels still dominate their energy systems, making meaningful emissions reductions extremely difficult. The United States has dropped sharply in this year's rankings. The report attributes this largely to weaker climate policy momentum following political changes, creating uncertainty around long-term decarbonization efforts. Interestingly, even wealthy countries like Canada, Australia, Japan, and South Korea perform poorly. This demonstrates an important lesson. Economic development alone does not guarantee climate leadership. Without strong policy implementation, even advanced economies can become climate laggards. India's performance. Now let's turn to India. India is ranked 23rd in the Climate Change Performance Index 2026 with an overall score of 61.31, placing it in the medium performance category after dropping 13 places compared to last year. India continues to perform relatively well in areas such as greenhouse gas emissions and energy use because its per capita emissions remain significantly below those of many developed nations. The report also highlights India's significant progress in renewable energy. However, India's biggest challenge remains coal. India must simultaneously provide affordable energy for over 1.4 billion people, while accelerating its transition toward cleaner sources. The report therefore suggests that India's future ranking will depend not only on adding renewable energy, but also on reducing dependence on fossil fuels and strengthening climate policy implementation. Key takeaways from CCPI 2026. So what are the biggest lessons from this year's report? First, no country is currently on track to meet the Paris Agreement goals, which is why the first 3 ranks remain intentionally vacant. Second, renewable energy is expanding at record speed, but the pace is still insufficient to triple global renewable capacity by 2030. Third, greenhouse gas emissions are still increasing globally, although their growth rate has slowed compared with the period before the Paris Agreement. Fourth, strong climate policy remains the foundation of every successful climate transition. Fifth, Europe continues to dominate the global rankings because of decades of consistent investment rather than short-term projects. Sixth, developing countries like Morocco, Chile, Pakistan, and India demonstrate that ambitious climate action is not limited to wealthy nations. Seventh, fossil fuel dependence continues to be the single biggest reason countries remain at the bottom. Eighth, renewable energy alone cannot solve climate change without improvements in energy efficiency and emissions reduction. Ninth, political commitment matters just as much as technology. 10th, the report shows that climate action is accelerating globally, but not fast enough to avoid dangerous warming. The Climate Change Performance Index 2026 doesn't simply rank countries, it measures humanity's collective response to one of the greatest challenges in modern history. Perhaps the most important question is no longer, which country is number one? Instead, it is this: will the world move fast enough before climate change moves even faster? If you enjoyed this analysis, let us know which global report you'd like us to decode next. And don't forget to subscribe to The Fellow Learner, where we transform complex global reports into stories that everyone can understand.